one of the things I've been thinking about was, can I think about it through my teaching experiences? Or maybe there's another way. Maybe I can think about it through my own experiences as a child and student through schooling. Education has taught us, let's see if this works, right? Education has taught us that there are 3 basic psychological needs that students have when they enter a classroom or a school community. The first is competence, autonomy, and relatedness. Competence refers to when students have that basic need of feeling that they are capable of the academic work expected of them, that they have confidence in their own capacities. Autonomy refers to when, well, it has 2 dimensions. The first is when they feel that they have some sense of agency in how and what they learn. The other dimension is when they are treated or they're recognized as unique individuals with their own passions and talents. Relatedness is more of social capital, so to speak, where they feel that there's some deep connection, social connection and identification. With a show of hands, how many of you here would say that they've had one or more favorite teachers throughout their schooling? Cool. I think it's safe to say that most of us have had at least one favorite teacher throughout our educational experiences, and that's pretty awesome. I've had 2, and I'd like to share some stories of these people because I believe stories have the power to transform our perception of the possible. My first favorite teacher came along when I was in kindergarten. I was too young to remember much at the time. I don't remember what her face looked like or what her name was. But there are some memories that are pretty vivid in my mind's eye. We were too young at the time to go out into the wilderness. So what she did was she brought the wilderness to us. And we were able to explore using all our senses. She tapped into our curiosity and created opportunities for us to explore using senses and to feel like we were close to the world and not kind of separated and marginalized. And it's amazing because these moments tend to be replicated throughout our lives in the future. Another thing about this teacher is I asked my sister a few days ago if she had any memories. She was in grade 1 at the time. I asked her if she had any memories of this teacher. And I know this teacher was pretty famous throughout the school. And she said, yeah, my friend and I used to clean her classroom every Friday after school for $2. And then she said something really interesting. She said, you know what, we were so bad at it that she had to teach us how to clean while we were doing it. But she would give us $2 anyway. And that's a pretty funny story, but think about it. Think about what that means. Imagine that these students had their first job experience at the age of 6. Most of us in this room only get that experience after we've graduated from university. So imagine what that means in terms of teaching kids responsibility and how to complete tasks, even if that means, in this case, learning on the job. Another memory we both had, it's pretty vivid, was that every Friday after school, there would be this huge lineup of students at her door because she would be giving out gummy bears and candy. And this was pretty remarkable and exciting treat because at the time, at school and at home, giving out sweets was a very rare occasion. So students really looked forward to this. But I remember it fascinated me at the time. What was really fascinating was the concept of giving. And not the kind of giving that we were supposed to do with our siblings and our classmates because it was a virtue and we were taught to do this really regularly. But the kind of conditional giving, the kind where you just give to a random stranger that you probably will never see again. And that really stuck with me, obviously, up till today. So I would like to call this teacher Mrs. Frizzle because she really does remind me of the teacher from the Magic School Bus because our class was a constant zoo and we were really happy about that. My next favorite teacher didn't come along until I was in grade 9. I was 15 years old and I remember going to class on the first day of school and there was a new English teacher and he said, "Don't call me Mr. Kenj, call me Marwan." Of course, that was really revolutionary at the time because you always had to call a teacher by their last name. There was no way you could get that close. And he was a teacher who high-fived his students. He pushed this teacher's desk at the side and said, "That creates a barrier between me and you. I don't want it. I don't want it between us." He's a teacher who refused to go into the teacher's room during recess, preferred to walk around the playground to talk and chat with students. And I would go and walk with him. And during those recesses, that's when I had one of the most stimulating, intellectually engaging conversations of my life. Listens to stories about him in different parts of the world, different continents I had never seen or imagined existed. And those stories are as vivid in my mind right now as if I had lived them. And because of that trust that had been created between us during recess and throughout our engagement and interaction in class, I started to share more. And he was a writer, and I like to write too, but I was very personal about my writing. No one was allowed to read my writing, unless you were like my soulmate, which at the time I did not have, so no one was allowed to read my writing. But he was a writer, and I felt there was a lot of trust, so I started to share my writing with him. And what he did was he started to write me feedback, and sometimes as long as my own writing. And I started to look forward to that feedback immensely, and I would write more, and he would write more. And then one day, he started to share his own writing with me. Now what that did to me, it just transformed my feeling of confidence, at least in my writing, of competence, and of equality between writers. And ever since then, I've been feeling much more empowered to share and to write. And it taught me how to write feelings, how to express those feelings with empathy, maturity, and intelligence, which I think is incredibly lacking in our educational system today. People don't know, students don't know how to express those feelings that are incredibly complex in our minds, but we never find the words for them because we're never taught to express them. Somehow they seem irrelevant in our educational system. The last thing I want to talk about is that sometimes there is actually no fixed formula on how to develop a positive student-teacher relationship. Because relationships are very complex, because they demand something from us as people. And that's not easy to give, especially when you have certain methods that you think you need to follow. But there are a lot of examples out there that can serve as guides. And if we just begin with the assumption that everything in education starts with that student-teacher relationship, and sometimes it's the smallest and simplest of things that you do that can make a world of difference. Like asking them how their weekend went, what they were doing over the holidays, how they're doing in their other classes, and actively and genuinely listening to what they're saying. And I heard a lot about active listening today. And sometimes it's about being aware and showing interest in their passions, their interests, their hobbies, their talents, and letting them teach you a few things about it. What are those skills you learn or you work with when you're doing gaming? Teach me. What is your favorite gaming tool? Things that we didn't have when we were growing up. It's important to kind of jump into their world to understand them better. And most importantly, and as Dr. March once taught me, is to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty. Experiment with them, play, tinker, and learn with them, because those are the moments that are replicated throughout their lives. Those are the moments where they will constantly be doing as they grow older, as they jump into the fields of work and in the market. Because as you can see, this is what I did when I was a wee baby. And I kept doing it. I was no longer afraid because I was taught to explore before I was taught conditioned fear. So get closer to you, students. Thank you.